Alright, kind of a response video to the bunch of videos out there on the subject of the I of human psychology. It's getting kind of complicated. I first wanted to just react to Nick's, the modern mystic. He was just describing the brain as it just happens, and that seemed really, really insufficient. I mean, we could do better than it just happens. And I think he hasn't backed away from that, but at least he hasn't mentioned it in the last couple of videos. Because that was almost like the swirl idea. It's just a little, it's just describing chaos. It's not describing order. And I think all of this that we call ourselves is ordered. It is determined. It's not, there's no chaos, there's no randomness, there's no ambiguity, there's no arbitrary. Well, ambiguous is, throw that word out. But yeah, it doesn't come from nowhere. There's cause and effect, and that's built into our structure. It's built into what we become over time. And you know, there might be the cause of the word I speak this moment. You know, you might be able to link it to something that happened 30 years ago, but it doesn't really matter. It has a source. It was built out of something. It's not just a spontaneous, random event. So anyway, from the world's perspective, from an objective perspective, you are what you do. I mean, you are what comes out of you, what projects from you. All right, from your perspective, you, or your I, is what you feel, what you consciously experience, what you think. I mean, what runs through your mind, what enters that conscious plane and floats around in there and then disappears into history. But that's the you for you. That's I for you. But what is that? Okay, what is the thinking and the feeling? And I think that's the point of this whole discussion is to get to is an understanding of that psychology. And then you sort of get into what Gray Tex is talking about and his obsession with hierarchies and control structures. You know, he's sort of ridiculing the dichotomy between religion and science in a way. Look, I've never really understood his argument, and I probably still don't. I just don't see it as psychology isn't that static. It's very personal, very individual, and it's very based on concepts, little bits of information. I mean, a little bit of information can change who you are dramatically. And so that, to me, if we're going to look for a control structure inside the brain, that's the control structure, is the programming. So Nick sort of has lent some acceptance to my idea that, our brain is more than one personality. Okay, you got the lizard and you got the ape and then you got the intelligence on top. And that they are competing with each other for control of us. Okay, so we do have this innate programming that's mostly built on emotions and feelings. And then you have this conditioned environmental stuff that starts when you're born. The world starts imposing some sort of judgments on you and a disposition on you of preferences and prejudices, and then you have this intelligence that works on that through the rest of your life. And some of these cruder parts of yourself you can work on over time. You can chip away at them, but it is hard programming. It is written it's sort of written in stone. And so it takes a lot of work to erase it or fill it in or dispose of some of that programming. But ideas still do have a great deal of power. Concepts, little bits of understanding. And to me, that's the great benefit of understanding human psychology, is to understand that ideas are powerful. I mean, we're just not run or controlled by these external mechanisms or by everything that was done to us. Part of it can come from us, from our own thinking about, depending on how much time we give our intelligence to work on controlling us, or adding some level of control. But it's not real control. I mean, in the end, what we are is that due person, that end result, the person speaking, the person acting in the world. And that, what that's going to end up being is going to be whatever rises through the competition that goes on inside our minds and wins, so to speak, that competition, and gets described as the will, gets described as the person, the thing, the entity in control. And no matter what one that is, it is still programming. It still is basically a bit of connected software. So anyway, to me, ideas are the game. I mean, we can. The rest of it is just something to be overcome. Basically, the rest of it is that static programming. That part of it is just built into DNA. So I would just make the argument that we were born basically, still born the bacteria, the consuming and reproducing organism. Then we have this socialization psychology that's built into our evolutionary history as social animals that are dependent on each other, that are dependent on the herd, and so that ends up getting built into our psychology. And a lot of that is arbitrary and nonsensical even, in terms of how that programming works. And then we, like I said, have this last hope of acquiring something more rational, and that's our intelligence. So I just think that we ought to be focusing on what people do with ideas and their understanding. And so that's where we get to sort of Laura Layla's argument, because she is still defending the selfish animal to some extent. She's defending those innate needs and drives and desires, and saying, in a sense, that they are the bottom of the pyramid or the foundation, and they've got to be fed first. Somehow they've got to be, I mean, maybe she's only arguing that they need to be adequately satisfied. But that always, where you go from adequate to indulgent, and then to excess, I mean, that's always a hard line to draw. I'm arguing that the human race has made the mistake, and that it's glorified the individual, it's glorified the natural needs, and that's why we fucked the world. That's why it looks the way it looks, is because we haven't applied a controlling intelligence, a disciplined intelligence. It hasn't had the power to dominate our will, to be the winner of the fight, the internal fight that goes on. Because our concepts of who we are and what we are haven't been strong enough. They haven't been clear enough, because we've had this ambiguous and mushy religion that people accept but don't really believe in. We've been using these false principles, these false rules of obedience. Instead of using true understanding, we've only been obedient, and it's always going to be, people are always going to cheat when they're just doing it because it's a rule. If they're doing it because they believe in it, they're going to be stronger, and they're going to be more capable of honoring the concept or the principle or the belief.